In 1962, my mother could make a head of lettuce last 2 full weeks. Not in a special container, not with any product you can buy today, with a trick her mother had taught her that took 30 seconds and cost absolutely nothing. Today, the average American family throws away nearly $1,500 worth of food every single year. My name is Harold. I'm 74 years old, and I want to tell you something that took me most of my adult life to understand. The women who ran American kitchens in the 1950s were not being frugal out of misery. They were operating a preservation system so precise, so effective, and so completely aligned with how food actually works that modern food science has spent decades catching up to what they already knew. Number 14 on this list was so effective at preserving dairy that a major American milk company funded research trying to disprove it in the 1980s. They could not. And number 7, a food scientist at Cornell recently confirmed, creates conditions that slow bacterial growth better than the technology inside your $800 refrigerator. These 25 tricks were not accidents. They were the accumulated wisdom of women who could not afford to waste a single carrot. Before plastic wrap, before sell-by dates, before any of it. Subscribe before we start. What you are about to learn will change the way you look at your kitchen. Let us count down. Number 25. The vinegar cloth for cheese. Every serious cheesekeeper in post-war America had a square of cheesecloth soaking in a shallow dish of white vinegar on the kitchen shelf. When a block of sharp cheddar came home from the grocery store, in 1955 a good cheddar cost about 40 cents a pound, a real investment. It went straight into that damp cloth, then wrapped in a second dry cloth on top. The moist vinegar layer created a slightly acidic microenvironment around the cheese that mold spores could not take hold in, but it was not wet enough to make the surface damp, so the texture stayed firm. A block kept this way lasted 3 to 4 weeks without a whisker of blue fuzz appearing. Modern plastic wrap suffocates cheese. It traps moisture and creates exactly the warm, damp conditions that mold loves. Every time you wrap your cheddar in plastic and find it furred over 5 days later, you are ignoring the trick your grandmother already knew. My mother's cheesecloth sat in that vinegar dish on the kitchen shelf for as long as I can remember. I threw the last one away in 1988 when we moved. I have regretted it ever since. Number 24. Storing tomatoes stem side down. My mother never put tomatoes in the refrigerator, not because she did not have one, she did from the early 1960s, but because she knew refrigeration killed flavour stone dead. What she did instead was place her tomatoes on the kitchen windowsill, stem end down, always stem end down. That small stem scar is the most porous part of the fruit, the point where moisture escapes fastest, where bacteria enters most easily. By resting the tomato on that spot, she sealed it. At room temperature, stored this way, tomatoes kept their flavour and lasted 4 to 5 days longer than ones stored any other way. A pound of tomatoes from the farm stand cost about 10 cents in 1958. Nothing could be left to wrinkle and shrivel on the counter. This habit was simply how it was done, until supermarkets started pre-packaging tomatoes already halfway to ruin, and everyone forgot why. Number 23. A lump of sugar in the bread box. That small white cube sitting in the corner of my mother's bread box was not there by accident. A single lump of white sugar placed in a bread box absorbs excess moisture from the air inside. The sugar acts as a miniature desiccant, pulling just enough moisture to prevent the clammy underside and the crust that loses its crunch. In an Indiana kitchen, where the bread box sat near the stove and the air could be humid in summer, this single trick extended a loaf by 2 to 3 days. A loaf of Wonder Bread cost about 15 cents in 1955. Wasting half of it was simply not an option. Some women used a small piece of apple instead. They understood the balance before food scientists wrote it up in academic papers decades later. Number 22. Storing eggs pointed end down. My mother stored her eggs in a ceramic rack and always, without exception, placed them with the pointed end facing down. This was not habit, it was physics. The rounded end of an egg contains a small air pocket called the air cell. As the egg ages, that pocket grows. By storing the egg pointed end down, the yolk stays centered and suspended away from the air cell, where bacteria grow most readily. Eggs stored this way last up to twice as long before the yolk breaks down. In the 1950s, a dozen eggs cost about 60 cents, coming from the farm down the road, not a refrigerated grocery shelf. They lived on the counter, pointed end down, in a ceramic rack that cost a dime and lasted 40 years. Modern egg cartons store them the wrong way around. Every time you open a carton, you are looking at eggs stored backwards. Number 21. Newspaper around bananas. Bananas release ethylene gas as they ripen. Every fruit sitting near them absorbs that gas and ripens faster too. My mother wrapped the banana bunch loosely in a single sheet of newspaper, which slowed the gas from escaping into the fruit bowl. She also separated each banana individually. Ethylene is produced most intensely at the stem end. When bananas are bunched together, they gas each other at close range. Separately wrapped and kept slightly apart, the same bunch that would have gone black in 4 days lasted 8 to 10. A bunch of bananas cost about 5 cents in 1960. The newspaper trick cost nothing and worked so reliably that women passed it on like a recipe, mother to daughter. Now here is where things start to get uncomfortable. The modern refrigerator is sold to us as the complete answer to food waste. The average American household now spends between $800 and $1,200 on a refrigerator, and yet food waste has got worse, not better, since these appliances became standard in every kitchen. Because my mother understood something the appliance manufacturers do not advertise. The refrigerator is only useful if you understand which foods belong in it. She kept her tomatoes out, her bread out, her potatoes out, her garlic out, her onions out, and the food lasted longer. Some of the entries coming up will feel wrong. They are not. Number 20. Celery wrapped in aluminium foil. Celery from the grocery store went immediately into the pantry, wrapped tightly in aluminium foil. Plastic wrap traps ethylene gas around celery, causing it to go limp and bitter within days. Aluminium foil allows ethylene to escape while retaining the moisture that keeps the stalks rigid and crisp. Celery stored in foil in a cool pantry stays snapping clean for up to 4 weeks. 4 weeks. The same bunch you bought on Saturday, still good on the last day of the month. My mother knew the difference between packaging that helped and packaging that did not. Number 19. The apple in the potato bin. My mother stored her potatoes in a dark burlap sack in the pantry, but she always tucked a single apple in among them. An apple releases ethylene gas in very small quantities. That slow, modest release actually inhibits the potato's own sprouting response, preventing the eyes from developing and the skin from going green. A sack of potatoes stored with 1 apple in a cool, dark place would last months without a single green sprout appearing. She also never stored apples near onions, knowing the ethylene would make the onions sprout within days. She understood the invisible chemistry between stored foods without ever having heard the word ethylene. Now we call it produce science and charge $40 for courses about it. Number 18. Onions in pantyhose. In any American farmhouse kitchen in the 1950s, look in the pantry and you would find onions stored in the legs of old nylon stockings, each onion dropped in and separated by a knot, hanging in a long chain from a hook. Onions rot fastest when their skins stay damp and they press against each other. Hanging in a stocking, each one suspended and separated, air circulated around every surface. They lasted months this way. Today we buy onions in plastic mesh bags and wonder why they go soft in 2 weeks. Number 17. The vinegar rinse for berries. My mother did not rinse strawberries under the cold tap the moment they came in from the farm stand. She made a solution, 1 part white vinegar to 3 parts cold water, poured into a wide bowl. The berries went in, swirled gently, left for 2 minutes, then lifted out and allowed to dry completely on a clean kitchen towel before being stored in a single layer. The vinegar killed mold spores and surface bacteria without affecting the taste because the concentration was far too dilute to detect. Berries treated this way lasted 7 to 10 days without furring over. Berries rinsed with plain water and stored while still damp start to mold within 2 days. Now here is what nobody talks about. Supermarkets design their stores around the assumption that you will throw food away, not as a side effect, as a deliberate feature. Studies have found that US supermarkets systematically overpackage produce in ways that accelerate spoilage. Pre-washed spinach in sealed bags generates carbon dioxide that speeds up deterioration. Mushrooms in plastic film sweat and go slimy 3 times faster than mushrooms stored in paper. My mother bought whole vegetables, wrapped them herself in the correct materials, and kept them the right way. Our system assumes you will just come back and buy more. Number 16. Mushrooms in a paper bag. The moment mushrooms go into a plastic bag, they begin to sweat. That moisture has nowhere to go. It pools. They go grey and slimy within 2 days. My mother bought mushrooms loose from the market and immediately transferred them into a brown paper bag at home, folded shut and placed on a cool shelf. Paper breathes. It absorbs excess moisture and allows air to circulate, keeping the mushrooms dry and firm. Stored this way, a bag of mushrooms lasted a full week. 1 paper bag and the mushrooms you bought on Saturday were still good for Thursday's supper. The paper bag was simply the correct container for the job. Number 15. Herbs in a glass of water. Soft herbs, parsley, cilantro, mint, tarragon, were kept by my mother exactly like flowers. Trimmed at the bottom, stood upright in a glass of cold water, covered loosely with a clean cloth, and kept on the cool side of the kitchen. A bunch of parsley bought on Monday lasted in excellent condition through to the following Sunday. The same bunch, left in a plastic bag in the crisper drawer, would have yellowed and wilted by Wednesday. The water method works because herbs are still living when you buy them. Every restaurant kitchen in the country uses this trick today. My mother called it common sense. Number 14. A pinch of salt in the milk. A single pinch of fine salt added to a quart of fresh milk on the day it was opened would extend its life by 2 to 3 days without affecting the taste at any detectable level. Salt is a natural preservative. At the tiny concentration of a pinch per quart, it is completely imperceptible, but creates a slightly inhospitable environment for the bacteria responsible for souring. In the 1950s, milk was delivered in glass bottles to the doorstep every morning. On a warm Indiana day, the bottles could turn by afternoon. The salt pinch was insurance. My mother knew this before anyone put it in a food science paper. I have been doing it for 3 years and have not poured a quart of sour milk down the drain since. Number 13. The butter crock. My mother kept her butter soft, spreadable and fresh at room temperature for up to a month using a butter crock, a small ceramic pot with a lid that sat in a shallow dish of cold water. The butter was packed firmly into the inverted lid and lowered into the water, which created an airtight seal. No air contact, no oxidation, no rancidity. The butter stayed perfectly soft for spreading. You replaced the water every 2 or 3 days. That was the entire maintenance requirement. Butter stored in the refrigerator hardens to an unspreadable brick and loses its fresh dairy flavour within a week. Butter in a crock at room temperature tastes better, spreads better and lasts longer. An entire generation of rock-hard refrigerator butter, and we still have not fully rediscovered this. Number 8. A raw potato in the bread box. A single raw potato placed in the bread box alongside a fresh loaf draws excess moisture from the air inside, preventing the damp, clammy crust that makes bread go mouldy before it has gone properly stale. The potato absorbs moisture passively through its skin. Replace it every week with a fresh one. A loaf of bread in 1955 represented a significant portion of the weekly food budget. Keeping it in good condition through the entire week was not optional. The potato trick added 2 to 3 days to a loaf's useful life consistently. Put a potato in your bread box tonight. Try it for a week. Report back. Number 7. Cold water revival for wilted vegetables. When cabbage went limp at the edges, when lettuce drooped in the salad bowl, when celery lost its snap mid-week, my mother did not throw them away. She filled the largest bowl she had with cold water, sometimes adding a handful of ice from the ice box, and plunged the wilted vegetables in completely for 20 to 30 minutes. The cells rehydrated, the turgor pressure returned, the cabbage came back, crisp enough for coleslaw. The lettuce straightened, the celery snapped again. A food researcher at Cornell confirmed that cold water rehydration restores up to 90% of crispness in wilted leafy vegetables within half an hour. My mother did not need a study. She had a bowl, cold water, and 40 years of experience. Here is the number that should make every one of us stop. The average American family throws away the equivalent of 6 full meals every single week. In 1953, with food budgets stretched to their absolute limit, families across this country wasted almost nothing, not because they were more virtuous, not because they had more time, but because they had the knowledge. The tricks on this list were not secrets. They were simply what you learned when you grew up in a kitchen where waste was genuinely unthinkable. The knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because supermarkets, food manufacturers, and the packaging industry made it easier to buy new than to preserve what you had. That convenience came with a price tag of $1,500 a year per household. Number 3. Bread kept cut side down. When my mother cut a loaf, she placed it cut side down on the wooden cutting board, not in a bag, not wrapped. Cut side down on the board until the next meal. The exposed crumb is where moisture escapes fastest and where bread stales most rapidly. By resting the loaf on its cut face, the board acted as a seal, dramatically slowing moisture loss from that surface. A loaf stored this way stayed genuinely fresh for an extra day. The wooden board mattered too. Wood is slightly porous and maintains a marginally higher humidity at the surface than plastic or stone. Whole generations of bakers knew this without having to explain it. Number 1. The cool, dark pantry and knowing what belonged in it. If there is one single thing my mother did that accounted for more food preservation success than every other trick on this list combined, it was this. She understood that different foods need different conditions, and she stored them accordingly. Her pantry, the cool, unheated north-facing room off the kitchen that sat at a natural 55 to 60 degrees all year, was not just a storage room, it was a precision preservation system built from accumulated knowledge. Root vegetables in the lowest, coolest section, bread in its enamel box with a potato tucked inside, hard cheese wrapped in its vinegar cloth on the coolest shelf, onions hanging in their stockings from a hook by the door, canned goods organized in rows away from the light, home canned preserves labeled and dated, every single food in the exact environment that kept it in its best condition for the longest possible time. She did not own a $1,200 refrigerator with a touchscreen. She owned a cool room, a handful of correct containers, and the knowledge of what belonged where. Her family threw away almost nothing. The average American family today discards nearly a fifth of every dollar they spend on food. The pantry was not just clever, it was the difference between a kitchen that worked and one that wasted. I have spent the last 3 years recreating what I can of my mother's system in the space I have. A cool corner of the garage in winter, a ceramic crock for the garlic, aluminium foil for the celery, a butter crock on the kitchen counter, a potato in the bread box. My food waste has dropped by more than half. My weekly grocery bill has dropped by $30, and nothing that comes into this kitchen leaves it until it has been entirely used. My mother would consider that the baseline. I am beginning to think she was right. Try 3 of these this week. The vinegar cloth on your cheese, the paper bag for your mushrooms, bread cut side down tonight. See what is still going strong by Friday. Then come back and tell me in the comments whether your grandmother was just being frugal or whether she actually understood something that 50 years of convenience food has made us forget. Because if you test these, really test them, I think you already know the answer. Subscribe. I will be here next week. There is a great deal more to uncover.